Welcome to Active Shooter, the podcast.
After decades now of mass shootings, we haven't found the answer.
A tribute to the victims of two mass shootings.
Thank you for listening to Active Shooter, the podcast.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Trying to piece together just what led to yesterday's massacre, the worst single-day shooting in the nation's history. The site of the tragedy, a Lubys Cafeteria, is along Highway 190 in the central Texas town of Killeen. Channel 8's Robert Riggs is live in Killeen now with the latest developments. Robert?
Lisa, police are now trying to determine why a very angry young man chose this Lubys Cafeteria to turn it into a deadly shooting gallery near this time yesterday. The gunman drove his truck into the cafeteria, then coldly, calmly got out of the truck and began going table to table, executing his victims. 22 people died in the carnage. Police say that they are puzzled by his motivation for doing this. They have been collecting some information into a psychological profile that is giving them some tips as to what may have been his motivation. Police also say that there does not appear to be any ties between the deceased gunman and employees or dining patrons at Lubys.
A loner, an oddball, few friends. It seems that we are seeing a pattern with the shooters that we have covered thus far. This episode is no different, as we dive deeply into the shooting that happened at Lubys Cafeteria on October 16th, 1991. If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the no notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge and not naming the shooter by their actual name. In today's episode, we will be referring to the shooter as Jason. National Bosses Day was on October 16th, 1991. Many employees were treating their bosses for lunch in honor of the holiday. There were about 150 people eating lunch at Lubys Cafeteria in Killeen, Texas on this day.
It was a beautiful fall day, and I had just finished up with my patients that morning, and my father and mother came in from the local golf course and asked if I'd like to go eat at the cafeteria. The place was packed, more so than usual. So we weren't able to sit in our usual spot, and we went and sat off by a wall.
The place was full. It was about 160 people there that day, I believe. And we sat at a little two-man table over against a window. There were two big plate glass windows and sort of a small brick column between it. Mike and I began this kind of different conversation, and he was telling me about a funeral he had just been to and how well it was attended. And so he began to half-jokingly say that if I were to die, that there'd probably only be 2 or 3 people show up at his funeral, and that would be his family. I looked at him and said, "Mike, you're my buddy. I love you. I'll be there at your funeral."
At 12:39 p.m., right in the middle of the lunchtime rush, a 1982 blue Ford Ranger pickup truck crashed through the large window located at the front of the restaurant.
I looked to my left out the plate glass window, and I saw the blue Ford truck as it made a circle around past my truck and was headed straight for the window behind Mike. As I saw him coming, I could see his eyes. They looked like fried eggs. They were just white, almost no pupil look. I've never seen anything quite like it. And I thought it was a lot of fear because I figured his accelerator had stuck.
All of a sudden, this truck came blasting through a floor-to-ceiling window, maybe 15 feet from me. It happened to be right where we normally sat.
At first, the patrons of the restaurant thought that a terrible auto accident had just occurred. A truck that was just on the roadway outside was now in the middle of the restaurant.
Of course, I thought it was an accident. The truck came all the way in. He knocked over a number of tables, and people were knocked over and injured as the truck came to a rest, and it was still bouncing on its shock absorbers. It came in at such a great pace and stopped so abruptly.
Two of the restaurant guests immediately ran over to the truck to offer medical attention to whoever was inside. Before they could get to the truck, a man wearing a green shirt leaped out of the driver's side door, holding a pistol in each hand, a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and his pockets packed full of bullet magazines. Jason immediately started shooting, and then he walked around in a large circle, yelling different phrases such as, "It's payback day," and "This is what Bell County did to me." He wore a smirk on his face as he began taking the lives of innocent people.
So I jumped up. I'm first aid and CPR certified, and so I jumped up to run around because there was an old couple sitting there at that plate glass window. As I circled around the left-hand corner of his tailgate, all of a sudden his left arm came out with a 9mm Glock, semi-automatic, and there was a female cashier standing there, and he shot her twice in the chest. It threw her backwards. I couldn't believe what was going on. And with his other hand, apparently he opened the car door and started getting out. And as he was getting out, I'm standing there facing him, 5 foot from him. But he started firing down the serving line, which was at probably a 40-degree angle from where he was standing. As fast as he could go, he was just shooting down the serving line, making people, trying to take control of the room.
People started fleeing and hiding under whatever they could find. The terrified guests hid under overturned tables and chairs, while others fled to the bathrooms to hide. One woman hid in a freezer and was later treated for hypothermia. A Lubys Cafeteria employee hid for cover in the restaurant's industrial-sized dishwasher, and he was so terrified that he didn't come out of the dishwasher until the next day.
People started screaming, and you could hear the wailing and people yelling, "I'm hit, I'm hurt." People were pushing their tables over and ducking behind the tables, and it just went like flash, instant chaos, and everybody flipped into survival.
Rather than firing random shots, it appeared that Jason was concentrated on delivering fatal shots. For instance, 10 of the 23 victims that were killed were shot fatally in the head. Some of the victims were holding hands, even though they were strangers. Others were praying, both alone and with each other.
On a semi-automatic, when you run out of bullets, the breech comes back and stays back. And when it came back, that's when Doty yelled out, "His gun is empty." That's when Doty and I jumped up and grabbed the chair. We thought we would exit. He turned and looked at us, and there was an eye contact for just a couple of seconds. Imagine your worst horror. This guy was horrible looking. I mean, his face was tight, it was drawn, and the eyes were just unbelievably white and large. And he pulled out another gun. And he came out with another gun, I don't even know where it came from. And he fired 3 shots at us, so we spun and fell to the ground. And when we hit the ground, I turned to look, and he had already ejected the clip and was coming in with another clip for the gun that was empty. So he had 2 guns going from that point on, just nonstop. He began a clockwise motion throughout the restaurant and just constantly shooting and screaming and yelling at the women in there, calling them all vipers and bitches, and look what the women of Bell County has done to me. Is this worth it? I'll make you all pay. I'm going to kill you all.
An auto mechanic, Tommy Vaughn, was named a hero that day. At 6 feet 6 inches tall and weighing 300 pounds, he selflessly threw himself through a window inside Lubys, thereby smashing it and creating an escape for victims trapped inside the restaurant. Tommy would be treated for deep cuts on his shoulder from the glass, but his life, as well as the lives of many others, were saved.
My mother and I were up in a front corner that we really had no way out. The gunman and his truck were blocking our exits. I heard a window way at the back, the opposite end of the restaurant, being broken, and I thought, oh my God, here comes another one. You're still looking for an explanation at that point. But then I saw people getting out that way. An unlikely hero had thrown his own body through that window to create an escape route. So when I would peek up across the top of our upturned table, when I saw what I thought was a chance, I stood up, I turned around, I grabbed my mother by the shirt collar. I said, come on, we got to run, we got to get out of here. And then my feet grew wings. I thought for sure he's going to see what I'm doing and he's going to turn around and he's going to shoot me in the back. And I just, waiting, every time I heard the gunshot, waiting to feel it was dreadful.
Witnesses said that there was very little screaming, neither from Jason or the victims. Other than a few random phrases that Jason yelled, there was an eerie silence that took over the inside of the restaurant. Police arrived at what was now a crime scene, and Jason immediately refused to surrender or come out of Lubys. In 1991, there was very little training for police officers in regards to what to do in case of an active shooter. Using their gut instinct and police training, they decided to penetrate the building and stop the threat. Once inside the building, they immediately started exchanging gunfire with Jason, striking him with bullets 4 times in the chest. After being struck, he fell to the ground, rolled over on his back, and delivered one final bullet into his own head. At 12:52 p.m., 13 minutes after crashing his truck into the restaurant, Jason was dead. He left 23 people dead and 27 wounded.
He started shooting at the police. They shot one round and caught him somewhere in the forearm, and he dropped one pistol on a plate of food. And he ran back into an alcove of the bathroom, or between the 2 bathrooms. He was trying to get into one of the bathrooms, but there were patrons in both of them that were laying on the floor holding the doors closed. So he was forced, he was hidden behind a partial wall and started a gunfight with the police. And he took real careful aim and he shot 2 shots that hit the gunman in the midsection. Well, it didn't kill him, but he dropped to the floor at that point. He realized he was dying. He realized it wasn't going to work. So he was also, wasn't out of bullets, but all the clips he had left fit the gun that he dropped earlier. So he's shelling them out one at a time to fire back at the police. And he finally put the gun to his left temple and he shot himself. I mean, just almost immediately, I could hear orders. You could hear sirens, all of these things going on. But I heard somebody just behind me start yelling, dead, 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 dead. And I rolled back to look to see who was yelling. It was EMT. They finally let them in. He saw me alive, and he yelled, "We have a live one." That was some pretty good words. Best words I'd heard, I guess, through the whole 12-minute ordeal. I was shot in the back. Actually, it was in the upper hip, and it came out my stomach. It actually didn't come out because I was laying belly on the concrete. It missed my backbone by a ½ inch, missed all the major nerves, missed all the major arteries, but yet it was life-threatening. I didn't have to have a blood transfusion, but they said it was so close, and they almost lost me a couple of times on the operating table. But everything's healed up, everything works, and everything's good now. Just an ugly scar.
During their initial investigation, investigators concluded that it appeared Jason had a deep hatred for women. With 14 of the 23 people that were killed being women, it certainly seemed that he could have been singling out women during his rampage. But if that was true, why didn't he shoot only women? And why did he allow a mother with her 4-year-old child to leave the restaurant safely? Some questions we may never have the answer for. Due to time constraints, we will not be able to go into the detail about every victim that was killed that fateful day, but you can find a link in the show notes that includes information about all the victims that lost their lives that day. Dr. Michael E. Griffith was a veterinarian from a nearby town called Copperas Cove. Most people referred to him as simply Dr. G. He was at Lubys Cafeteria meeting with a friend of his, Pastor Kirby Lack, for lunch. As they were catching up on each other's lives, the blue pickup truck came blasting through the window. Dr. Griffith was the first one shot as he ran towards the truck to see if he could offer help for what he thought was an automobile accident. As he was heading towards the truck, Jason got out and fired his first shot, killing Dr. Griffith. Pastor Kirby Lack also went towards the truck to offer help, and when Jason fired at him, Pastor Luck was able to leap out of the way just in time, narrowly missing the shot Jason fired at him. Pastor Lack dipped his fingers in someone else's blood and smeared it across his face, laid down and held his breath, pretending to be dead. Even when Jason kicked at him, Pastor Lack laid limp and didn't move a muscle. Jason fired a shot next to the pastor's head, missing him, but causing Pastor Lack temporarily deafness due to the noise of the blast. Susanna Hupp sat at a table with her parents, enjoying lunch when the massacre started. Susanna usually carried a small firearm with her in her purse, at nearly all times. At the time, there was a law forbidding her from carrying a firearm into a public place. Afraid of losing her chiropractor license, she opted to leave it in her vehicle.